Welcome to the Maker's Mirror podcast. I'm Keith Hayden. I'm here with Michael Woudenberg.
Woudenberg, yep. Close enough.
Woudenberg. Okay. Always got to, test the first time. You're actually saying it with the actual person. I'm here with Michael Woudenberg, author, polymath, just an overall super interesting guy that I've met through Substack. And we are both Sci Friday regulars. We're both authors on there. And weekly, people come out with their writing and share and collaborate and really help each other out. It's been a great community. And one of the benefits is I got to meet you, and that led me to your books. That led me
Mhm.
to your newsletter. You've got a lot going on. And as I was saying before, I read the back of your novel where you've got your about the author section. And I was
Mhm.
like, this conversation could last a long time.
There's definitely a lot. I will only correct you on one thing, and that is I am not a polymath, but I am an aspiring polymath. And so I view
Gotcha.
it as a, and that's just it's just a nuance. But I view it as a challenge.
Mm,
Like people are like, oh, what makes you think you're a polymath? You're no Da Vinci. I'm like, no, 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 no,
yeah,
no.
yeah,
But I would like to be. So,
yeah.
for me, I view that as a challenge and an aspiration, not an end state. So,
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Because you're right. You're definitely right. I like that you corrected me on that because it is true. There's a lot of people who throw around that word, polymath, multi-potentialite, whatever you want to say. But I don't know, man. I feel like you're on the way, especially after reading your first novel, which I very much enjoyed. Um, and we can talk about that. There's so many, man, I was like, man, there's so many things to ask about your military stuff, but I'm just gonna let you kind of lead the
let's go. I
way.
mean, just
And
I just I mean, I would actually say, grab it. Where would you like to go? You want to talk about the military impacts on the novel because you were Air Force, and
yeah,
so that was something that you commented on was you could see
yeah.
the impact of the experience on the novel.
Sure, sure. Yeah. First, I just want to start with what got you to want to write a novel? Because it's not everybody's
Mm.
first inclination when it comes to a certain experience or what they want to say. What inspired you to write?
That's a great question. So, um, I really kind of, well, step back a little bit. I was part of a group, 2000, let's see, 16 to 18-ish. It was called Mixed Mental Arts. It was a Facebook group. There's a podcast by two guys that were, well, actually, Brian Callen, the comedian, and his friend Hunter Motz were the co-hosts of Mixed Mental Arts, and it was a fantastic exploration. They did a ton of reading and they brought on cool guests. Like they had Jordan Peterson before he was famous or infamous, if you want. They had Jonathan Haidt. They had all these people, and they had this great idea. So mixed mental arts was kind of like grappling with the complexities of life, or grappling with the complexity of being human in the octagon of life, I guess would be how I'd phrase it.
I
They
like
had a
that.
fantastic community. I met some of the most wonderful people, like the guy who did the art for paradox and integration. I actually met him at Mixed Mental Arts. A lot of the ideas were generated in there. I actually was helping a group. We were kind of coming up with the Mixed Mental Arts handbook. Like, what are these different topics? How do these work together? And so that ended up, the interesting thing is the group ended up nuking out in a weird way.
Mm,
I don't, it's, it was just interesting because it got big and then it got kind of complex because you start
mm,
getting all of these different
yeah,
opinions, all these different things.
yeah.
And then there was like, how hard do we grapple with these, right? Like certain sacred cows make great hamburgers, other sacred cows you can't touch. So it was that weird tension that they could never get together, and that kind of collapsed.
I
But those
see.
ideas were always stuck in my head, and my goal was to
Mm,
actually create a more accessible and enjoyable version of the mixed mental arts things. So when you were reading and giving me feedback on some of your things, each chapter is actually kind of like a cluster of mixed mental arts concepts that kind of
um,
build on each other, and then you start to play with them and move them around. So
yeah.
that was one of the things. As you're giving me the feedback, I'm like, I can totally take that critique in the book,
Yeah.
because it does kind of get, in some ways, a little chunky, but
Yeah.
in other ways, it's building up because
Yeah,
the more
definitely.
important aspect, it was the novelization of
Yeah.
mixed mental arts, less
Hmm.
than it's an organic story that I just tossed interesting ideas into, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I could tell the entire time when I was reading it that you started with concepts, you started with ideas, and then the story was bolted on. And then as you got going, the story really came into its own and it did really turn into something really cool. And I mean, it got me to want to read the second novel, which I'm 5 chapters in now.
Oh, well, there we go.
Yeah. So you did a good job
Five
with
chapters.
that.
You're just about to finish the first arc.
Yeah, I already got to where, yeah, he's made some decisions and it's kind of shaken out like why did he really do that? And
Yep.
I like his character. I really like what you did with Shinigami. With a lot of the characters, what you're doing in the second book. But because I was the same way with my book. It was the exact same thing. I didn't have a group like Mixed Mental Arts, but I was just like, I have all these ideas about
Hmm.
society and about ways that it's messed up and how it could be better. And I wanted to meditate on that. And I had a bunch
Hmm.
of kind of multidisciplinary things. And I was more on the fantasy side. I come from more like
Hmm.
video games and wanting to integrate that in there, but yours is more the opposite side. We have this kind of Venn diagram going where
Yeah, yeah.
yours is more grounded and rooted in science, in fact, in logic, in really educating about AI. And that's the next question I had. Like when it came to the AI concepts, that's obviously a very big part of the first
Hmm.
novel. Why did you choose, of all the mixed martial mental arts concepts, why did you choose AI to go in on for your novel?
So AI makes one of the most powerful literary foils on which to
Absolutely.
analyze what it means to be human.
Easy.
So, I mean, well, you can talk like, and that's the thing, you can talk about all these ideas, logic versus emotion. You can talk about that in a human centric.
Hmm.
Well, okay, it can just go over your head, but you're like, okay, I have a logical AI and it is being purely logical, but that
Right.
works because it's an AI.
Hmm.
And then you show that the failure of this AI to actually integrate what it means to be human is the fact that it doesn't have the emotions. And
Right.
that can help you tie in the idea that Jonathan Haidt wrote about in the happiness hypothesis,
Hmm.
that humans think we're logical, but we're like a logical rider on an emotional elephant.
Yeah,
And I like to
that's
say
a
when
big one.
pink elephants go on parade, that logical elephant or that logical rider can't do anything. And so
Yeah,
social media is just that. All you see on, so like
absolutely.
Twitter,
Yeah,
Twitter is pink elephants on parade with a
absolutely.
bunch of people who think they're logical. So AI makes that great foil, but also I keep getting sucked in because people are freaking out about AI
Yeah.
and like can AI be creative? Well,
Hmm.
this is chapter 3, right? How creative are humans? We like to think we're
Hmm.
so uniquely
I know.
creative, but we're
Right.
actually very derivative and we use
Absolutely.
mimicry
Yeah.
and we build off things. Like one of the most common questions that I get asked in author interviews is, so who's your inspiration? Oh, what do you mean? Who did I model my book
Right.
after?
Right.
You
Yeah.
know, and I can tell you it was my prose is modeled after a web serialist, goes by the pseudonym Pirate Abba, and I believe it she writes The Wandering Inn. It's a
Hmm.
fantastic, but she does this nice, clean, light, not thin, but like most of my paragraphs are like
Yeah.
4 sentences or so.
Yeah.
Just it moves, it
Yeah. I like
keeps it
that.
lighter. That was the
Yeah.
prose I used, but then the psychological concepts and and everything else is Robert Heinlein and Orson Scott Card. But their prose is so dense when you read it
It is.
that
Yeah.
you have to work through it. So I can tell you
Yeah.
how I kind of modeled it. But again, how creative was I if I modeled my book after 3 other authors? Well, it
Exactly.
wasn't that I modeled it, it's what I did with the modeling.
Exactly. And you're spot on. And I knew as I was reading your book that yeah, we vibe on how we see and how we think about AI because it's we're not uniquely creative. I mean, even down to our language, everything that I'm saying, I got from somewhere. I got from my
Right,
parents. I got, and then it becomes you because there's
right.
nobody else around. when
Right.
eventually the exemplars start coming out. But everybody comes from somewhere. You learned everything you know from somebody else, or your teachers taught you, your parents taught you,
Mm-hmm.
you saw your friends do it, you saw it on the internet, and then you decided to do it or not to do it. And that is the creativity question with AI. I don't know if you read or listen to Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you're
No, no, I haven't gotten
he's
there
a
yet.
he's a one of these Twitter gurus, and I
Okay.
learned a lot from his stuff. And so he was on a podcast recently in the last year, and he was talking about how he had David Deutsch on there, and Deutsch is a huge AI thinker, not just AI but logic in general. And he was
Mm-hmm.
basically like, these systems are not creative. True creativity, we have a hard time defining exactly what it is. Because you're right. Most of 90% of what we do is straight up, we're just copying it.
So let
Right.
me so we addressed it a little bit. So like I said, chapter 3 is, almost intelligence is the title,
Right.
but it
Hmm.
talks about it actually. So you had made a comment about how it felt like some of the essays were kind of, or the chapters felt essayish.
Yes.
Well, to be fair, a lot of my writing starts in nonfiction essay
Yeah.
form and then kind of gets brought back over and as it works. So chapter 4, I was like, I like the biasing bias,
Hmm.
how, that AI is just multiple layers of bias. The algorithm is a mathematical bias on top of data bias on top of everything else, right?
Mm.
But I was like, okay, I'm not able to break this out so it doesn't sound like I'm a lecturing. I'm like, well,
Mm.
I'll just make it into a lecture where Kira's in grad
Right.
school,
Yeah.
and then I can make it. The lecture is no longer a problem because it is
Gotcha.
a lecture.
Right.
Oh,
I like
we're.
that.
Let me weave back a second. You were talking. Oh, the creativity. Okay,
Hmm.
plot twist. What is a plot twist?
I would say it's an unexpected event that is hopefully telegraphed in some way, but that happens in the story.
So,
That's what I
right.
would say.
So this is interesting. You can't do a plot twist unless there's an expectation of a plot,
Absolutely. It's got to be set up.
right?
Yes.
So how creative are you? What is true creativity? Well, we love a plot twist that just tweaks our mind. But what did
Hmm.
they do? They zigged when we thought they were going to zag. So
Mm.
they were based on so much mimicry and foundational expectations for that story that a plot twist can be treated, right?
Mm.
Otherwise, if they were purely creative, you're going to be there and be like, I have no
Exactly.
idea what is going on. So, what we
Exactly.
talk about for creative is der- minor derivations from the expected. And
Exactly.
that is where you actually find interesting creativity.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the game of creativity, right? You've got to have enough of the familiar in order to appreciate what's different about it. Because if something's
Hmm.
completely different, you're totally knocked off. You have no idea what the
Yep.
hell's going on, and you're probably not going to be reading it or watching it for very long because it's just
Right.
too crazy. It's too hard to understand. But when we can bring our frameworks, we can bring our schema and our biases in there, our
Hmm.
stereotypes. Of course, these
Yep.
are all pejorative words in general, but I like how you really broke them down in the novel and really nuanced them and had Kira and the rest of her associates really think about this when they're
Hmm.
building this
Well,
technology.
well, I mean, let's just poke on stereotypes because it sounds pejorative,
Yeah.
but I mean, when you look behind you and you look behind me,
Yeah.
we have intentionally stereotyped something, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we have selected a backdrop to articulate something. I mean, everything from, you've got the podcast mic and the earphones that communicates something more, a little bit probably more professionally podcaster. Now, if I
Yeah.
wanted to, I could just bring my mic in front of me and I
Yeah.
could talk in front of it, even though I'm actually talking through my headset.
Yeah.
So we apply these things, and
Absolutely.
going back like our military service, right?
Yeah.
So our uniforms are a communication of stereotypes.
Absolutely.
You can walk up and in seconds you will know, I mean, obviously my name, but then branch, But then but even at a distance, after everyone went away from the BDUs into like the ACUs and ACPs and everything else, you could tell, you could look across the room and be like, there's an Air Force guy. And now Space
Hmm.
Force has blue lettering.
Yeah.
So even though you're wearing the same, what do they call it, ACPs now or whatever,
Yeah.
I can tell the difference between an Air Force and a Space Force soldier
Yeah.
just by the color of their tags before that. But then
Absolutely.
you've got your unit patch
Yep.
that communicates. You've got rank that
Hmm.
communicates. You've got skill badges that communicates. You've got deployment patches for the Army that communicates. You can read a person and just apply these like instantaneously. And we
Absolutely.
know this because if someone is a poser, we rip them to shreds. Like
Uh,
I know you didn't go overseas. You didn't earn that
right,
deployment patch,
right,
you stupid
exactly.
son of a bitch,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
But so we apply these stereotypes, and it's important to understand that. Now, as I think I shared in the book and what I've written about before, is
Mm,
that the problem with stereotypes is when you don't let somebody violate them,
right. Yeah.
right? Oh, you must be like this. It's
You're
like,
stuck. Yeah.
you're stuck, right?
Yeah.
But they're also incredibly important for another term for
Yeah.
stereotypes that I like to use is their social graces.
Yeah. Yep. I remember reading that in your story as well. I really like that you broke that down because it's so true. And I'd never thought about it that way. That is the danger of stereotypes. It's when the stereotype is just so fixed that you can't see anything else
Mhm.
besides what your expectation of that person
Right.
is.
However, starting off with an expectation, again, this is where it's interesting. On
Yeah.
the one side, it can be horrible. On the other side, it can be social graces, right?
Right.
Until you get to know the person, behind them, and then you can start to tailor them a little bit more effectively. So where you make
Yeah.
a stereotype rigid, versus just a useful piece of potential information going forward.
Yeah. I love the way you described that too, about how in the military it was so easy to just identify somebody. I don't know. Do you miss that sometimes about it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, as far
Yeah.
as and it's shortcut. I mean, there's also the thing like knowing that we're both prior service.
Yeah.
I mean, you were enlisted, I was an officer. There's going to be different. I mean, even just that piece of knowledge, there's going to
Right.
be different. I'm not going to be, oh, did you go to the academy, right?
Yeah.
I'll probably assume that you went to what's the Air Force base in San Antonio? Is that where you went to basic?
No, I actually was an officer.
Oh, were you?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, I thought you were enlisted. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, it's okay. It's all right. No,
Oh.
I'm actually an Air Force Academy grad.
Oh.
Here I
Oh,
am.
see? No. So actually, I'm going to use that. I'm going to use that on myself, right? I'm going to use that on myself. I failed in a stereotype, and I don't know where I got it, and I can't even identify where I got it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's cool. It's all
that's
right.
interesting. No, no, no. It's just I find it fascinating because I was wrong on it, and I'm trying to figure out why I was wrong. But it's such a perfect example of where it can go
I
wrong,
think
isn't
no,
it?
no, no, and I give you, and no, I give it to you because I do kind of throw off enlisted vibes. You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, like laid back, not not as like I don't know. You know how
Well, let's
us
just
officers
well
be
let me let,
sometimes.
well let me just put it this way. I have never known an Air Force Academy graduate who did not announce that in the first 5 minutes.
Hey, there you go. I think it's because I've been out long enough to know that it doesn't really work where I'm at. Like
Oh, right,
just
right.
what I'm doing, like writing and stuff online. There's no grads. Like I've met
No,
one.
right.
I've met one other grad, not an Air Force Academy grad. He's a West Pointer, but
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
met one entrepreneur who was also a grad
Well,
in the
it's
last
sort of
8 years.
it's sort of
Yeah.
funny. I mean, the you talked about the West Point grads, right?
Yeah.
The rest of us officers, we call them ring knockers
Yep.
because they're the
Mhm.
ones with the big old graduation ring, click,
Yep.
click, and you'd be like, all right, there you go, right? They announce themselves. No, that's funny. Okay, so no, that's a great example. I like that. I like that I was wrong on that one because it made such a great case study
I
for
got mine right here.
there we go. I like it.
It's within arm's reach, you know,
Within arm's
just in
reach.
case,
It's such
just
an
in case these
identifier.
scenarios happen.
Just in case these scenarios happen, you can just slide it on. Well, I mean, but right there, that right there, you just put that on, it signals, right?
It does, man. No, so anyway, I do miss it. I'm the same way. I do miss the identifying mark, especially as being a black guy. Sometimes it's just like I felt like coming from being captain, I was a special agent in the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and then all that stuff goes away. No badge, no
Hmm.
rank, no Air Force Academy ring to protect me, nothing. I'm
Yep.
just
Yep.
random Joe black guy now. And it was literally, I had to start over when I got out. I don't know what your experience was, but
I mean, there's a I don't know. I I guess I went into like Honeywell, Raytheon, Lockheed, working in
okay.
technology side.
So you went
So
corporate.
that
Yeah,
identification still kind of carries weight
it
there.
does.
It didn't
Yes.
get lost. It also wasn't a liability. I know a
Mm,
lot of times in like tech fields or things like that,
absolutely.
prior service can be like, oh,
Yeah.
versus having MIT or something like that. It's your
Yeah.
grad school, right? So no, so mine was a little bit. Mine has never been a vanish. It's always been a
I
bit of
see.
an elevator, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. I knew once I decided because I went into random stuff. I wanted to be a Spanish court interpreter when I got out, and everybody looked at me crazy. And then I went into education. And so I went to be a teacher, and I was in California at the time. And yeah, my military service did me no favors
No,
there.
no,
It
no,
just
not
didn't
yeah.
it didn't help at all. It was actually a hindrance because they would see
I,
you as, the typical stereotypes. You're aggressive, you don't know how to listen. Well, all you do know how to do is follow orders. So it's a miracle that you can even think for yourself. This is just the military in general
I
stereotype that
was
I
I
dealt
once
with.
had a I once had a actually I wrote this. I wrote this as an essay I wrote on this. I'd have to look up the thing. I'm not going to do it right now. But so I write for the audience. I write on polymathicbeing.com, and I write all across the gamut. I try, like I said, the aspiring aspect. I try intentionally to pick different
Shift it
topics
around.
and work with
Yeah.
them. But one of them, I had this coworker. He's like, Mike, I'm sure when you were in the army, there were times that you just were told to follow orders and you were to do it. Because I was like, this is wrong. We shouldn't do this. He's like, just salute. You should know how to do this. And I was
Hmm.
laughing about it because I'm like, okay, we're both officers.
Hmm.
We were the ones that were supposed to ask and answer why more than anything. And I had
Absolutely.
to explain. I said our 5 paragraph op order in the army was situation, mission, execution, command and signal and service and support. The
Hmm.
the situation was big why. Why are we here?
Hmm.
What's going on? Why left, right, and front and back for your units? The mission was who, what, when, where, why. And
Hmm.
execution was the first paragraph of execution was commander's intent. Why?
Right.
So you started off with why, and then the rest of it was just details on how.
Right.
And so it was interesting because I was always leading with the why.
Mm.
And that was something that I think a lot of people outside of the military, and I would imagine in teaching, like, oh man, you're just all you do is you command. Anytime you would raise your voice or oh, we're not in the military anymore.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they
Yeah.
didn't even know you were Air Force. I mean,
Yeah.
no,
I like that. That's funny. No, but it's true. You're absolutely right. Since I've been in education, I've been in all these fields where basically it doesn't open any doors. It has only pushed people away. So I really stopped leading with it. I still put it, it's on my LinkedIn and I still do mention it in like bios and stuff when it's relevant because I actually put out my military autobiography just a couple of months ago.
hmm,
I wrote that
saw
and
that.
yeah, it
Okay.
was really proud of that. And that was obviously a time where I'm going to talk about the Air Force Academy. That was a big part of the story. That was a big part of the experience. But outside of that, in my fiction, I don't really address it too much. But when it comes to your military stuff, like that was one of the coolest parts of your book. And where a lot of our stuff overlaps is the military mindset and then the military action as well. I mean, and
Hmm.
you did something that I don't really do very well. I think my strength in fiction is really dialogue and interpersonal relationships. I have a really easy time. I love characterization and I really love
Hmm.
like making different characters and bringing in this little
Yep.
quirk and stuff like
Yep.
that. My characters really stand out. But one of your strengths was, man, that battle scene towards the end. I'm not going to spoil it for anybody because we want people to read your book. But I was like, he did he basically did like a Tolkien-esque battle, but he did it in like 3 or 4 pages. It was super snappy. I felt like I had the zoom of the battlefield. I knew what sides were where. I knew what movements the enemy were doing. I was like, damn, he's army, so he can do this. So I think you just had that camera. Can you talk a little bit about how you put that together? Because I thought that was one of the most memorable parts of your book.
Oh, that's awesome. No,
Yeah,
so it's actually funny you mentioned Tolkien-esque. So Tolkien wrote from his experiences in World War One.
that's right. He did.
And so what's interesting though is that battle scene is based off of World War One warfare.
That's
And
right. You did mention that.
it was from the podcast Dan Carlin's Hardcore History.
Ah,
He has an entire World War One series, which if you haven't listened to that
I
one,
have
or
not.
if your audience hasn't listened to that one, his World War One series is
I
fantastic. It
bet it
was
is.
normally World War One is like what, 2 paragraphs in a history
I know.
textbook in ninth
Yeah.
grade or something like that.
Yeah.
He does like
Unfortunately.
12 hours and it is visceral and it is
Yeah.
immersive and it was incredibly educational. But that, so I kind of derived that from his articulation there. And
Yes.
so that made it a little easier to go. And it's kind of funny because you mentioned the characters and the interpersonal relationship. That's something that I need to do a little better, like you said, little quirks. But
Mm.
I intentionally went super light on my characters.
Hmm.
And going back to the stereotypes, it's what's interesting is I want people to not think about it when they read it, but maybe think about it afterwards. How did you see a character? Because I don't really
Mm.
describe them,
I see. I
right?
like
I
that.
don't have like a lot of idiosyncrasies, like
Yeah, that's
Ethan
true.
Odiambu,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah,
You know his name,
that's true.
you know his position,
Right.
and you get a little tip of where he came from towards the end.
True.
But everything else, any envisionment you have on him is based on a all of the profiles you might have based on name, position,
Mm.
and actions.
Right.
And so I don't want to spoil it for people, but if we ever have a one-on, not non-recorded
Right.
conversation,
Not
I would
recorded. Right.
love to know how you interpreted some of these characters.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um, so kind of an interesting twist back on that. So, but yeah, with the military stuff, it was, yeah, it is kind of that trying to keep the prose again light, but then informative. And
Yeah.
again, like we talked about, being able to hook in the imagery, because if this was the first time these battles were ever to be described,
Right.
they would kind of fall flat a little bit. It's one of the reasons Tolkien goes so deep into world building.
Yeah.
But now, if I'm going to write a fantasy novel, I don't have to go as deep into the world building
Right.
because almost everybody has or been acculturated with Tolkien,
Right.
which is an
Exactly.
interesting twist on that one as well.
Yeah. I think you're right. And I do, going back to what you said about characters, I never thought about that because I do think more character specific when I write fiction, but to leave them more open to interpretation to where I want the reader to basically be able to like literally step into their skin, like not just read about these
Hmm.
characters, but become these
Yeah.
characters. That respect. That is a
It's
deliberate
now
choice. I love that. I think it's really cool.
now it has its cost, and
It does,
as you
yeah.
were reading and giving some of the feedback, and it's this is the interesting thing about writing, is that there are times my wife is my wife is my primary editor and
Same.
art. Okay, so
My
she's
wife's too.
fantastic on this one. If she doesn't get it because she knows the rest of it, I need to fix it
Hmm.
really bad.
Yeah.
So anyway, she there are times she's like, I don't like this. I'm like, okay, I have to tease this out because
Mm.
I could either go and write like 4 paragraphs to describe it or find out really what's missing. And I would tell you the number of times adding a sentence or
Hmm.
even adding a modifier,
Right.
just
Yeah.
an adjective,
Yeah.
just even when it comes to the perspective of like emotions, I don't have to have this entire scene of rending garments or anything else. I
Hmm.
just have to change a modifier on, instead of said, it's um you know uh, help me out here, just
Demanded, commented,
demanded,
responded.
comment,
Right.
yeah, things like that. Just you switch it, and then suddenly instead of just said sadly, it's sobbed or something like that,
Yeah.
right? Or moped, or however you want to,
Hmm.
all the different ways you can just take a word and just go bloop, just a little tiny
I
twist,
love
and then
that. Yeah.
suddenly you've unlocked an entire bit. And that was something that I think I got better in the second book,
Mm,
or improved. I focused on it more in the second book,
I
and it would be
see.
the only thing that if I were to do something different in the first book, it would be kind of look for those little single things to kind of trip a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, I think so. But I mean, that's what one of the things I love about writing fiction, especially writing novels, is that you grow as you write
Hmm.
because you can't, there's no way you can write it all in a single day. So you're forced to, over time, come back to it. And every day is different. Some days you're ready to write, other days it's just kind of a slog. Some days you have 5 minutes, other days you have a whole day to write. It just
Hmm.
depends. And so, I saw that evolution with your book to where it did start out more, a little bit more essay focused with the story bolted on, but then the story really does take off. And man, I wish we had more time. We're already down to like the last 5 minutes, but I really, because I really wanted to ask you about Noah. Like he was by
Okay.
far, I'm so sad that so far he's not in the second book because obviously, given the circumstances, it makes sense that he's not in the second book so far. But I was like, man, you did such a great job with him from the jump. Like, and I mentioned in that feedback from the first
Yeah.
time you introduced like him as an adult, it was like,
Yeah.
okay, this guy is going to be important.
So Noah cracks me up. So there's a statement, so when I sat down and finally started to write the novel, um, I hadn't written fiction before. I'd written a lot of nonfiction. So you talk about the evolution. It was really clunky. It was funny because when I was going back through and editing, I went back to the beginning. I was like, oh God, just pulling and ripping and fixing and
Hmm.
everything else. And then I got to chapter 11 and I'm like, I found my voice.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
what I started to do was I finished chapter 11. I went back and edited chapter 1
There we
again,
go.
12, 2, 13, 3, and moved my way
Right.
back through so I could carry that voice back without getting lost in the old voice. So I just alternate. And that worked out well. But one of the phrases I heard, and I can't find out how to attribute it, but it stuck with me, is that good writing should surprise the author.
I like that.
And Noah surprised me over and over and over again. I never would have expected him to have been the influence on unlocking the AI.
Right.
Never expected him to be the influence in, you know, releasing the AI. Never would have been like all these things. When I first started, they were supposed to be in opposition, and
Right.
they ended up constantly being brother and sister,
Right.
which they are, and that was so much more natural.
Right.
And it was so funny because I could never have actually plotted what Noah did intentionally from the beginning,
No.
but by letting the characters have freedom,
Yeah.
this goes back into kind of letting go with the storyline,
Yes.
having the idea of the arc, and then letting the characters kind of flow with that.
Right.
You'll find a hook coming up. I think it's chapter 8. My daughter had an idea for a character. It's funny, but this character was supposed to be a bit of a comedic relief. I guess I can give away a little bit of a tip. You're going to run into a cat. My daughter wanted a cat because I've got this cat Puddin who sleeps on
Pudding.
my computer when I'm typing, and she'll overheat my computer to the point I have to lift her off so I can keep typing, or else my computer crashes. But she was my daughter's like, you need to, she my 10-year-old or 11-year-old, she read Paradox and she wanted for integration, she wanted the cat in there. I'm like, I don't know how that's going to work. Suddenly I found a spot. It was interesting is I had no idea what to do with Puddin, what I was going to do with her, but then watching that cat go from almost a bit of a comedic relief into something
Hmm.
a little bit more interesting
Right.
was uh was kind of another surprise for book 2. So not having that tight grip on the narrative, I think, is also kind of fun.
It's so important, man. And I'm just smiling over here because this is one of my favorite things about being a novelist and writing novels specifically is that feeling of when the characters take command, when
Hmm.
they decide. And it sounds crazy. If you're listening to this and you don't write fiction or you're watching this, okay, you need to go and write some fiction because you will see that these made up people or these made up beings or whatever you make up, they literally truly do take on a life of their own.
Hmm.
eventually. It's literally just you writing what they would say or what they would do or what they want to do, or if they die or something like that. It just becomes that. And there's nothing like it, man. I love it
Yeah, I don't know
to
how to,
tell
but
stories.
you don't write the story. You let the characters write the story, and
Yes,
it's the weirdest
it's weird.
thing to consider is that I am writing the story, but the characters are actually, you'll find things that you could never have thought about before. And like I said, good writing should surprise the author.
Yeah,
Have an idea of where you want to go so that way you can keep it all on track, but
yeah,
also have the flexibility to let the characters tell a story.
yeah, yeah. And hearing you say that and hearing you talk about, because I wasn't sure, I wasn't sure because some people write. I know my brother, for instance, my older brother, he writes more technical stuff. I've read some of his fiction, and it tends to be more free. It's almost like dream state. Like he's super
Hmm.
rigid in one, and then it's like dream state, kind of stream of consciousness in the other. But I can tell you're a craft man, and you care about the craft. You want to get better. You wrote a great book for the first book. The second one is on par so far for what I've read. I can't wait to see you grow as an author. And knowing that, I didn't know that. I thought it was just going to be two books, but I guess you have a couple of books planned for
Yeah, so
this
the
series.
yeah, so I have a whole arc of five.
Mm,
So book one, there's a split between the AI and the humans.
yeah,
Book two follows the AI. Books three and four are actually going to follow the humans.
that's what I figured.
And
Yeah,
then books five is going to merge it back together.
got it. So we're down to our last Zoom minute. Anything else you want to say to the crowd and to the people listening, watching, where they can
Um,
find you?
Yeah, as I said, I write on polymathicbeing.com. It's a Substack. If you join on Substack Notes, you can join us, Keith and I, on Sci Friday. I got a lot of inspiration from Sci Friday, which is all woven into book two. So from names to characters to different things like that has been fun. The website for the series is thesingularitychronicles.com. It's available on Amazon and basically anywhere else you want to get a book. Book one's on sale right now for I think it's 99 cents, and then book two is $3.99 for the ebook. Also available in paperback for both. The covers are quite nice, so they're a good look on your bookshelf as well.
Very cool. Thanks for joining me, Mike. And
Yeah.
let's wrap again. Come back